We begin with food waste.
A third of all the food
Fresh food that is being wasted on a colossal scale. Why are there hungry people in a world of abundance?
How can we grow food with the restrictions that we have?
Freeganism is not just about dumpster diving. It is about building community.
Something more than just a shelter. A place like home where you can get a decent meal.
Five years ago, a group of ministers and community leaders got together and decided that there were a lot of hungry people in the neighborhood, so we needed fresh food, which is nutritious and good for people's diets. So we decided to have the vegetable garden.
Well, this neighborhood is gentrifying very quickly. So the access to produce and fresh food, especially at an affordable rate, is shrinking. And we've seen the last few grocery stores that cater to people of lower income disappear.
The truth is that people in low-income situations are more and more not having access to fresh, nutritional, affordable food. So the idea of growing food, which is a real natural answer to people that are food insecure, came up. But how do you do that in an urban context?
We only have until 11 o'clock to get everything downstairs for the food pantry. All those people are lined up to get the food. We have to harvest it. You should tell them on 70.
We realized that we had 4,000 square feet of really underused roof space. And we always thought that it would be nice if we could do something productive with that space.
Well, as the architect in the group, early on, I came in sort of pessimistically. We all knew the age of the building was 100 plus years, and so my immediate concern was, well, what can the roof hold?
And we said, okay, well, let's solve the problem of how can we grow food with the restrictions that we have.
I did some internet searches. I found out some other groups had been using kiddie pools. So with a 4,000 square foot roof, we were able to get 1,000 square feet of growing space.
This is just leftover stuff that we're putting. We have a compost bins over there. This is going to go to the food pantry downstairs.
We have volunteers. We're completely volunteer based. So we have volunteers that arrive around 10 o'clock in the morning. On Saturdays in particular, they quickly get to harvesting because they want to get the food down from the roof and into the food pantry as quickly as possible because clients will be coming to the food pantry at 11.
Wonderful. Look at this. Isn't that just gorgeous?
All of the fresh vegetables are gone by the end of the food pantry each week. So I think people really value having it and are learning more and more how to prepare and cook fresh vegetables.
Thank you so much.
People just get very locked up in this idea that they have to buy their food. And then they're beholden to whatever the prices are, whatever the nutritional value is. And the truth is, we're even in a city like New York, there's opportunity to grow food.
We eat food that comes from South America, most of our organic produce comes from California. The miles that it takes for our food to travel are extensive, and all of that takes fossil fuel.
It's called the Hell's Kitchen Farm Project, not the Hell's Kitchen Farm, for a reason, because we have a vision that potentially there could be other farms in our neighborhood.
But what we've created is an example that you could spread all over the city, that anyone could put on their roof. You can go down to the hardware store and get a kiddie pool and enough soil and start growing vegetables. So a school could do it, or like we have, a church.
In many communities in our city, there are unused lots that people can, talk to their council person about, talk to their community boards about, and utilize these lots or these rooftops or whatever it is, and say, well, let's get food, let's start growing food for this community that doesn't have access. So I absolutely think if it's not exactly like our farm, you can replicate this idea in almost any community in our city.
Tonight, we begin with food waste. Much of what is grown on American farms never gets to market.
A third of all the food the globe produces a year, it's out. It gets wasted. That's 1.3 billion tons.
A report by the Natural Resources Defense Council says that as much as 40% of all the food produced in the United States never gets eaten.
And the amount we throw out has increased by around 50% since the 1970s. At this rate, in 40 years, when you order pizza from Domino's, they'll just deliver it straight to the nearest dumpster, as they should.
Look, when we're talking about food being thrown away, we're not talking about rotten stuff. We're not talking about stuff that's beyond the pale. We're talking about good, fresh food that is being wasted on a colossal scale. This farmer, for example, has invested £16,000 in growing spinach, not one leaf of which he harvested, because there was a little bit of grass growing in amongst it. Potatoes that are cosmetically imperfect. Bananas in Ecuador, where I visited last year. Eventually, I set about writing my book, really to demonstrate the extent of this problem on a global scale. The simple answer to the question, why are there hungry people in a world of abundance, is that the food system is not set up to feed people. The food system is set up to make money. That's what our economy does. It turns nature into cash. A system that was set up to feed the world would not be driven towards selling products to the richest parts of the world and using resources from all over to supply that economy. It would be about producing local food in those places where people need it and to get it to the plates of the hungry. And that's not how the system is set up. Globally, we waste a third of the world's food supply, but in rich countries, that can be up to a half of the entire food supply. And one of the biggest sources of food waste is on the farm. This is not the fault of farmers. Every farmer I've ever met grieves over the waste that is caused by the policies of the people they're selling to, in particular, the big retailers, the supermarkets. A supermarket can't immediately and always forecast exactly what demand is going to be. There's a risk in the market, that's inevitable. And the question is, who bears that risk? Supermarkets are disproportionately powerful in the supply chain. And that means in the issue of the risk, supermarkets will offload that risk onto farmers. They will give a forecast of demand, but at the last minute, they can cancel that forecast at any minute. They can say, right, all those cabbages you've grown for us, we don't want them anymore, and we're not going to pay for them. And the farmer has no one else to sell it to. On top of that, of course, supermarkets in rich countries have phenomenally strict cosmetic standards that they impose upon produce. So anything that doesn't look perfect is rejected. And even though it's just the same as the next one in terms of nutrition and taste, sometimes even better, it won't be sold because it doesn't look uniform, perfect, straight, and just how the supermarkets have arbitrarily determined produce should look. And that results on a lot of farms in 20, 30, sometimes 50% of their food being wasted. People have become so disconnected from what food really means, the resources that go into it, the labor that goes into it, the fact that we really depend on land for our survival. We're humans, we're a terrestrial species. And we live so far from that. And living in a supermarket system is so disengaging. You just can't keep track of where all this food is from and how it's been produced. It's an artifact. You see the way supermarkets treat food. It's like Christmas decorations. They pile it high. It's a spectacle. And that means that once it's a spectacle, we start applying aesthetic, cosmetic criteria to something that ultimately is just going to become sludge inside our stomachs. And we've got to recalibrate that and connect ourselves to the land that the food was grown on and all the embedded resources in that food. And once you make that connection, once you realize that your daily food choices, what you eat, what you waste, connects to those global environmental problems, connects to the fact that there's 1 billion people in the world who are hungry. Once we connect our food choices to all of those things and we realize that we can make a difference simply by eating and enjoying the food that we buy rather than wasting it, I think that's a very empowering thing. We can all make a difference. We can change the way we eat, and we can demand that the businesses that we give money to every day for our food align with what I think everyone believes, and that is that wasting a third of the world's food supply is immoral, and it's got to end.
It's a mix of greens and sweet, and it's delicious. It's all reclaimed food, all salvaged.
Corns could go a little longer. Aside from the corn we're ready to eat, maybe we should just do it. Freeganism is not just about dumpster diving. It is about building community in an urban area where there's a lot of people and it's needed most, to say, no, this is not sustainable, to say, no, we refuse this.
So again, this is the Freegan tour, and what we're going to be doing tonight is one aspect of Freeganism, and that is we're going to be doing some food rescue.
So this is our first stop, and we are going to go through the things. They are still open. We are allowed to be here. If there's any problems, we'll talk to them and we'll be as nice as possible. We're not looking for conflict, at least not when we're with a group. There's lots.
Okay.
I think this is real garbage.
Seaweed.
Oh, this one does not seem to be moldy. The rest is moldy. French baguettes, not vegan.
I can look at the date and tell you that this says best by July 18th, and that was 2 days ago, or a few days ago. So this is not really literally expired. It's just a Best By day. More cheese crackers. This is just one store, and it's just a typical night. We didn't choose a special night to do this. And it's tons and tons and tons of food all throughout the city that's being thrown out instead of being put to good use. We're going to be eating it. It's not bad food, and it shouldn't be wasted while we have a lot of people who are starving, malnourished, and hungry.
Are we all tied up? All right.
have this idea that it's just that you're literally just like going through a ton of like disgusting garbage and then eating it, and that they feel like, you know, people who are doing this are like very radical. But I mean, it's not that way. I'm a recent graduate. I graduated a few months ago, and I mean, like, my income is extremely low, and like I'm on food stamps, you know. And so yeah, I mean, it's a great way to like get produce, get fruit, which is something that, like, you know, is kind of like a luxury.
So yeah, a lot of these are moldy. That's why they threw them out. You're not going to sell moldy strawberries, and they're not going to do what I just did, which is pick through and pick out the ones that are half bad and save the ones that are half good, because that wouldn't make sense as far as a profit-making company goes. As far as a food-eating person, it makes lots of sense to pick out the bad ones and throw them away, and then take the good ones home and wash them and eat them, or make something delicious. Oh, cinnamon sugar. It varies widely how much of my food is dumpster dived. I can say I never have to buy produce, I never have to buy bread, things like that. You would never have to buy another thing in your life. If you could find it for sale in a store, you will eventually find it discarded outside. And that's an unfortunate truth.
I'm trying to go zero waste for the summer / the rest of my life, and I think the idea of freeganism is an interesting take on redefining waste. A lot of it is trying to use less, I think, or buy less stuff that I know that I won't use. A lot of issues with waste is when you walk through the supermarket, you realize that there's so much packaging on wrappers that might not necessarily be needed. So instead of like buying a granola bar, I'll try to make stuff on my own. And instead of going to a store and like taking takeout and stuff, I generally bring containers with me everywhere for compost, for personal usage, as well as sporks are my favorite things. So I definitely utilize that.
It's not about saving money, it's about knowing that food will otherwise, if I don't get it and other people don't get it, it's going to end up in a landfill. A lot of energy goes into the production and then even the disposal. That we don't have a landfill in New York anymore. This stuff gets shipped far, far away. It's a waste of our resources.
Very happy. It is a media night, so it's generally fine, but it's
Here we have the kale that we found last night, and it's being stir-fried with onions, a little bit of salvaged oil, and some herbs.
Delicious. And then I even put some lime on top.
What happened was in February I lost my job, and I just happened to be walking up on the Upper East Side one day, and lying on top of a big bunch of bags of rubbish outside of an apartment building was one of these granny shopping carts, you know. And then I said, you know what? Money is kind of tight right now. I don't have anything else to do. So I went back, I grabbed the granny cart, and next thing you know, I'm going around to like a Duane Reade, and I find like a 6-pack of Corona, throw that into the cart, and you know, I just started finding all this great stuff. And next thing I knew, you know, like my refrigerator and my pantry was just like bursting with stuff, and I could eat for free by dumpster diving. And so for me, it's not so much a political statement or whatever. It's more of a way to live in New York City. I could either pay my rent, or I could shop in the supermarkets like everybody else. I can't do both.
Okay, welcome to the Freegan Feast. The food we are having this evening is all freegan, meaning it was not purchased. So it's a combination of food rescued from retail waste around New York City and food that was grown in community and home gardens around the city as well. Yeah, we've got some grilled garden zucchini, some rescued lettuce salad, some beautiful garden kale, wild Juneberry and mulberry jam, rescued bread, mashed potatoes, some very spicy olives, some couscous, some guacamole, and some hemp barbecue tofu that was also rescued from retail waste. Enjoy. Yeah, absolutely. I try to live my life as a freegan. Obviously, in New York City, that's a difficult task. I don't buy into our culture that says we have to buy everything and have everything new and get the newest of everything and have the newest fashions and the newest trends and the newest electronics and everything like that. I make do with what I have. I repair what I can. I try and learn to repair from someone else if I can't. And yeah, try and make do without purchasing as much as possible.
Yeah, people always say how noble it was for me to quit my job and do this full-time. To me, it was very self-motivated. I wanted to do this because I wanted to spend my time on something that I thought was very high impact. Leftover Cuisine is a nonprofit organization that brings excess food to people who need it at homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and food pantries. So we take food that would normally be thrown out from restaurants, catering companies, cafes, and we bring it to people who need it, who are hungry.
The food that Rescuing Leftover Cuisine provides through its volunteers is an added benefit, a boost to our food budget, and allows us to provide more product to hungry New Yorkers. We serve about 350 meals a day, servicing about 200, I would say, clients each day. People that are homeless and looking for a meal, or people that live in the area but just can't get enough money in their monthly budget to cover meals.
So I grew up in a pretty humble background. My parents were directly from Korea, and they didn't really know that much English when they first came here. So they struggled a bit. I remember a time when we basically had ramen for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and like a luxury meal for me was a different type of ramen. We've had a bunch of stories told to us as kids, my brother and I. Stories like if we didn't eat all our food, then our future generations would starve that same amount, or things like we would go to our afterlife and have to eat every single thing that we ever wasted. Those values, those core values, were what I grew up with.
It's an incredibly valuable resource, making use of something that would otherwise be thrown in the garbage. So we're incredibly grateful to having that extra boost to our food budget. It's not that difficult to do this, but yet it provides a critical solution to a serious problem.
While other food rescue organizations have a set limit of how many pounds of food they'll come by to pick up, we have none. We will come by for any amount of food because we know that it can feed someone.
Rescuing Leftover Cuisine provides, probably between 100 and 200 pounds of pastry, of breads, of even main entrees, meat and potatoes as well.
So NYU was when I first came across food rescue in the form of a club that brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters called Two Birds, One Stone. And I got really involved with it because I realized that there were some gaps in what they were doing because they only operated on weekdays. So I got really involved initially just because I wanted to solve that problem. After graduating from NYU in 2013, I worked at JPMorgan Chase for about a year. I had already been working on restaurant cuisine on the side as well, and you could see the tremendous difference between 1 hour of work at JP Morgan and 1 hour of work at restaurant cuisine, and the impact was just much different.
But here, they do care about us. This is family here. It's not easy to get a hot meal. So when they opened these doors for me, I was blessed. To the grace of God, this meal tastes delicious.
To have a piece of cake or a nice piece of bread, it lifts the spirit. It sounds simple and it sounds silly, but actually it's a huge part of making this organization and making something more than just a shelter or a soup kitchen, but a place like home where you can get a decent meal, a good meal.
In New York City, there are 1 in 5 New Yorkers who rely on food assistance programs to eat. And it can be preventable because 40% of the food that we produce in this country is thrown out. And according to the National Resources Defense Council, if we take just 30% of that, it is enough food to feed 50 million Americans. So it could effectively eliminate hunger. So we have opportunities for people to volunteer 7 days a week at every hour of the day between 10 a.m. and midnight. Food rescue in and of itself is so sustainable. Each of the members of the public that come out, they live in that neighborhood and they're able to go to the restaurant in that neighborhood and bring the food that would have been thrown out to the homeless shelter right across the street or very close by. Not only does the food that was going to be wasted go to the people who need it, the food waste that would have been going to landfills emit methane gases that are 20 times worse than carbon dioxide. The concept and the very idea of bringing and diverting that food waste from landfills to people who eat it makes the whole system, the whole food system, very sustainable overall.